A new Mac Miller project to kick off 2025 with Balloonerism.
So this is his second posthumous album. It's something he worked on prior to his unfortunate passing. And it's something that a lot of people have been waiting for a long time. There was a lot of leaks of these tracks that have been around for a while. So to finally get them completed, put into an album, nicely polished, is great. So let's jump straight into it with the first track, which is Tambourine Dream.
Well, this is more just an intro to the album, and it is pretty much just a Tambourine Dream. The title is very fitting. Not too much content in this, so should we jump straight on to the actual first track, which is DJs Cord Organ featuring Scissor.
Ooh, so this starts off so atmospheric, and there's a very long intro on the track until we actually get any kind of instruments like a drum beat or, you know, some kind of something on top of that atmospheric sound. And it actually felt like quite a journey from the first track into this one to get to something that was part of a song. And usually that would be something that I'd find quite detrimental. But for this, it works nicely. I felt like it kind of built me up and prepared me for what I was about to listen to.
Yeah, it was practically just an instrumental until about 2 minutes and 30 seconds into the song. But I agree, it was a nice instrumental, a calming moment. And I think it did set the scene for what we could come to expect for pretty much the entire album in terms of those spacey, ethereal, yet calm vibes. I would say that this was more a Scissor song than a Mac Miller song.
Yeah, Scissor's feature knocked it out the park entirely. There wasn't too much Mac on this track, but too much Mac on this track. Aye. Mac attack. And Scissor's feature, though, did carry this through, and I really enjoyed it. But we'll move off that onto the next one, which is Do You Have a Destination? And Mac just has a voice that is unmatched. Something about it lends itself to the beats that he uses so well.
I thought this was a calm track with some nice bars delivered. It felt like it took a while for us to hear Mac in this album, which is a little bit crazy, but a lot of talk around fame, the impact of fame, drugs, and I think that those deeper messages and lyrics that you can read into quite a lot continue throughout the album. But again, this was a good example of this. And there was one bar I wanted to point out, which was, I gave my life to this shit, already killed myself, which I thought, listening to this, obviously with Mac's passing, there's a lot of bars in this where you go, oh, that's tough.
There's a lot of stuff talking about death and like untimely death, and unfortunately that's what happened to Mac in the end. So it's quite humbling to be listening to this after his passing, and this is a very chill track, but somehow Mac's vocals make it feel upbeat. I don't really know how to explain it. The beat is chill, but his vocals are not.
They bring it to life a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. But we'll move off that onto $5 Pony Rides, which has been the only single from this album, and it is so chill.
The chill vibes are executed so well, but the one thing I like about this is, I felt like there's so much to read into it. Like at first I'm thinking, well, this is a track about like girls, girlfriends, and then it kind of goes on to more flings, but the way which Mac explores that aspect of his life and kind of relationships and times he's had with girls, maybe good times, bad times, it's really interesting and it makes it a good listen.
Yeah, this was the first track where I actually started to kind of properly get into the lyrical content of the album, and I started to think, you know what, actually bro is saying stuff here, because a lot of times you listen to projects and you think this track's a bit throwaway, but throughout this project I thought it was all very purposeful. There was a lot of meaning behind every track, and in this one in particular the bass is fantastic, and there's a couple of keys on top of it, and it just like widens it out so nicely.
Yeah, it was almost a jazz style, kind of really laid back instrumental, and I did particularly like that on this song because I think that they executed it really well. But I would say towards the end of the track there was a fair bit of repetition. Throughout there was a fair bit of whoa whoa whoas, which is fine, and I appreciate Mac's style is never super energetic. It's never just been like ba 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 ba. But I thought the last minute was practically just the same lines on repeat. So we'll move on to the next song, which is Friendly Hallucinations. That's a tongue twister.
There's a little beat dropout that I want to just point out on this track at around 1 minute 30, and I am a sucker for a little a cappella section, and that just works so nicely with Mac's voice. I think there's something about his voice, and I will say it over and over again, it's phenomenal.
Again, I really liked the topics that were being explored on this song. Kind of is love real? Like, what is love? Is it only real in your head? It's kind of only real if you think it's there. I like this type of deep, introspective, thought-provoking rap, and
it makes you think.
Exactly. This song was the best example of that on this album for me.
Yeah, there's a proper there's like a lot of odd noises on this track. There's parts where it sounds like a guitar being like reversed, played backwards, and it just adds an extra layer to it. And it does kind of make you feel like you're tripping, like you're somewhat hallucinating. So it kind of ties in with the track. But we move off that onto Mrs. Deborah Downer, aka a little Debbie Downer.
See, one thing I want to point out at this point in the record is that it is flowing very well between the tracks. The producers have done a fantastic job of making this an album that you can just put on, listen to without any random massive beats coming in or anything. Maybe that could be to its detriment in some people's eyes, especially later on in the album when these vibes continue. But a song about struggling with drugs, struggling with life in general, like what is the goal of life? Again, completely different topic to girls and love, but executed really well.
Throughout this album, there's a lot of like talking points where I think, you know what, that's come from the heart. That's something that he's thought about. And on this track in particular, bass and drums are doing absolute work. And the drums just sound so raw. It sounds like an actual drum kit that's in the room with you when you're listening to it. And I love that kind of style because I think we are kind of inundated with a lot of EDM drum style things where it's like it's clearly just written in a piece of software.
Yeah, it felt like a moment of light in a world of heavy music. Like even rap music, I know that was a big one, that. But even rap music now, a lot of it is about how hard does the beat go. But this wasn't about that. One thing I would say about this song again, though, is that the last minute was just the same line repeated again. It's not a problem, but it's happened a few times, and it does happen a few times throughout the album. And I kind of think maybe should Max still be here, he might have added an extra verse, which is quite sad in itself.
Could be something that we're missing out on there. So it's hard to kind of discredit it for that. But we move off that onto Stoned. And I am immediately in love with the guitar tone on this track because it is fantastic. It sounds so crisp and raw and it's great.
I really couldn't work out with this what it was actually about. Like, was it about a girl, which it is clearly referencing, but then I thought the girl was like an innuendo for like weed or drugs or whatever. But I liked that. The fact I was sat that it made me think was enough for me to really like this song. It was a relatively one-dimensional song, but it was fine.
Yeah, there was a lot of, occasional panning between, so the backing sounds had like, it would be in your left ear and then it quickly switched to your right ear, which is quite jarring at times, but it works nicely with this. I think they did it at the right times. They didn't overdo it. They didn't make it distracting from the song as a whole. And there was like a halftime slowed down beat at the end where Mac's lyrics and vocals are still going at the same speed, but the beat is completely pulled back, and I really liked that because it just added a little bit of pizzazz to the end of the track.
And then we go on to Shangri-La. I swear Call of Duty Zombies manages to come up in our reviews quite regularly, and if you are a big music fan, we review a lot of albums and a lot of projects, so remember to hit like and subscribe. But what did you think of this track, Tim?
Just how super is a supermodel? That's the only question I've got. And the talking intro was different from anything else on this album so far, and I really liked the swelling synths that were throughout this track. I think it worked really nicely.
I liked the mix on this one. I felt like for maybe the first time there was a lot more concentration on Mac's bars, at least in a couple of sections, like 2 sections of the song. I felt like his voice actually shone through and outshone the instrumental, which, I don't know, obviously we've been able to hear what he said the whole time, but this felt like there was a lot of focus on what he was saying.
Yeah, a lot of emphasis on listen to these lyrics, these are important. But we move off that onto Funny Papers, which has a really weird, I want to say British accent in the intro. I'm not sure what's going on there. It kind of reminds me of the intro to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy when Nicki Minaj is doing her British accent.
I know what you mean. I think there was a bit more of a focus on drums in this song, and I actually think that it injected a bit of energy that was required, because as much as I love the calm, jazzy vibes, I was a bit like, give me some more. And this wasn't unfitting for the album, but it was more.
Yes, yeah, it was more than what we'd had so far. And I really enjoy that every so often there was like a chorus of voices that would join in, and it'd be like 4 or 5 different layered voices, but it just every so often it would pop up, and I just like that little addition to it. But we move off that onto Excelsior, which I wondered, is that kind of a Stanley reference? Because he used to say Excelsior all the time. And this song is about like childhood and telling stories about being a kid and kids in general. So maybe he was making that Marvel shout out.
Yeah, it definitely could be. But again, like you referred to there, another topic explored well, childhood. I think that it is a thing. I've thought about this as well. I kind of felt like I related to this song in some ways, where it's like once you become an adult, you kind of lose that creativity and that freedom, and everything's drilled into you. All the, not fun elements, but the creative elements of life kind of drilled out in a weird way. So I liked this song. I liked what it was going for. My only problem with it was pretty much just one verse again. That's really my only issue with a lot of these songs is it just feels like they weren't quite finished. And I appreciate that we've got the content anyway, but one verse is a little bit too little.
It makes you wonder what potential the album could have had in different scenarios. But there's one part in this where it gets really chaotic. It's around 1 minute 35, but it's still, even with all these sounds coming in, all the instruments, it still manages to keep its chillness. And I think that's something that a lot of artists can struggle with, to keep the kind of serene feel for an album, because like we've been saying, sometimes you'll get to a track and all of a sudden it's bang, everything's there. Whereas even though this one is doing a lot, it's still pulled back. I don't know how to explain it, but it's great.
Well, we'll move on to Transformations featuring Delusional Thomas.
There's the little chicka 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 throughout the background of this, which I really like. And I think this is kind of like a alter ego type beat.
In truth, I actually didn't like this one. I really didn't like the voice effects that were going on. I get what they were going for. I understand how it kind of fits into the album and changes things up a bit, but it's not a song I'd ever put on.
No, it's clearly just a fun track. It kind of feels like a bit like I don't want to compare him to Eminem, but a bit of a Slim Shady alter ego. Let me throw in this other voice that I've got. So we'll move off that anyway onto Mannequins, which has a very light orchestral sample that you can only just make out, but it sounds like it's like at least a 10-piece orchestra that's playing in the background, and it's so negligible, but it adds so much.
Yeah, like you say with the instrumentals, there is quite a lot going on despite them appearing calm, which is nice when you can dive into it a little bit deeper. Again, with this song, I think I've picked out the topics of what Mac is talking about throughout this album more than anything. And this one, again, is questions of life. What is being normal? Like, what quantifies as normal? It's just great. Like, I really, really enjoyed him exploring this. And I think that it produced an album where most people can listen to it and kind of pick a topic or a few songs where they really relate to it.
Yeah, definitely. He's definitely put a lot into the lyricism throughout this album. There's a couple of harp sound effects in there that work really well, but we'll move off that onto Rick's piano. And this is about Rick Rubin, who is a prolific producer of tracks. He's done everything from System of a Down all the way up to rappers to, he's done everything. So to hear him referenced on an entire track was quite surprising.
Yeah, it's a strange reference as well, not one that I would have expected from Mac Miller. But one thing that I took from this song is there was the line, "The best is yet to come," was repeated a lot. And I found that kind of sad in the context, but also in the context of when Mac wrote this. I feel like, and I think we're all guilty of this sometimes, kind of not living in the moment and being happy with what's happening right now. It's always like, the best yet to come, but maybe it's not always.
Maybe not quite. I mean, I liked the vibes of this track, but it didn't really do a whole lot for me as a song as a whole. The end bit was cool with how crazy it gets, but as a whole, it didn't do a lot for me.
Again, the last 2 minutes of this track, as I've pointed out many times, literally the last 120 seconds were just the same line repeated, or maybe the same couple of lines repeated, which I think this album has been guilty of trying to fill moments with repetition or even just extended instrumentals, which is fine, but maybe you could have just had it be a shorter album.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a problem. A track is allowed to be 1 minute 50 seconds instead of forced to be 3 minutes. But we'll move on to the last song in the album, which is Tomorrow We'll Never Know.
There's a really cool trick that they do in this track to kind of build a sense of dread but also give you happiness as well, which is they're going from major keys and then they throw in a minor chord and then it resolves on a major. So it's got that little feeling every like bar that comes in. There's a little tiny section where you go, oh, this is going in a weird way. And then it resolves and you go, oh, it's back again. And they go, oh, it's back again. And I really like how they use that to carry the song through.
It was almost 12 minutes long, which is crazy.
That is crazy.
I didn't expect it from the last song in the album, but I don't know, this built a real scary feeling. It made me feel uneasy, which for me was a strange way to end the album, because the rest of it's been very thought-provoking and calming, and then it kind of ended on a I don't know how I feel vibe, which I wasn't expecting.
It feels like, I've put it down where it feels like you're having a bad dream. It's not a nightmare, but it's a dream where you're kind of going like, what the hell is going on here? You're not necessarily scared or upset, but you're kind of on the edge and you're kind of thinking what's happening. But for me, it's a very long outro, but I listened to every second of it and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a cool soundscape.
Well, Tim, we've covered every second of the album now, so what did you think of the album as a whole?
I thought this was a fantastic addition to Mac Miller's discography. I know sometimes posthumous projects can be rushed out. They can be things that maybe the artist wouldn't have released themselves. It's clearly unfinished work. This felt very polished and like it was as close to the final product that we could want to get. And I think a lot of care was put into finalizing this project.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. I think the production throughout was fantastic. Not too much energy, but not what was needed in this project. The lyrics and the topics explored were fantastic. Really enjoyed those. One I'll definitely go back and re-listen to and take out different elements of songs and find new meaning in those. I thought that this was a great album. And to be honest, I've obviously listened to a lot of Mac's work, but I've never listen to it in a review sense where I know we're actually going to go talk about it. So this was quite nice to really dive into what was happening throughout, because I feel like it would be quite easy to not do that because it's so calm and so easy listening. A lot of people might just have it on, but really give it a listen and really dive into it.
Yeah, I was amazingly surprised because I was the same as you, whereas I'd probably say I've listened to a couple of his albums, but mostly singles. I know like his top tracks and that kind of stuff. So to actually listen to a full project, I was like, you know what? This boy was special. He was very special, and it's sad that we've lost him. But what rating would you give this album out of 10?
For me, Mac Miller, Balloonerisms gets an 8 out of 10. Really enjoyed the project. Think that there was fantastic content throughout. My only drawback is the fact that, as I say, I think there was a little bit of time filled throughout the album in terms of repeated lyrics, repeated choruses, and maybe the instrumentals went on a little bit long too far in moments. I lost my words there. But I would say that, I don't know, I feel like I wasn't expecting this to be as good as it was.
Yeah.
But what rating would you give it?
I've given it a 7.5, which again, I'm quite surprised at how high the rating was because, again, like I say, I didn't know how much of a fan of Mac's I was, but after listening to this, it's made me want to go and dive into his past catalogue and really get like involved in the music scene with Mac Miller.
Well, what an album.
Oh, fantastic.
What a fun time. And if you had a fun time watching the video, then please do leave a comment and let us know what you thought of this project down below. And remember to hit like and subscribe.
Thank you very much.